Hi guys, so welcome to the second video tutorial for our introduction to data analysis. In the last video, I did a bit of an introduction. Now in these videos, we're going to demonstrate how to source data and how to read data. We're going to be looking at the philosophy around all these activities, and then you learn how to do this. As basically the idea for these tutorials for those who are learning, right? So normally what you will do if you are trying to source for data is to look for a repository where there is data, right? So that's the first thing we're going to be looking at. And we're also going to be looking at writing code for how we probably going to look at the data that we have sourced, right? So the first thing that's advisable to do is what you see over here. So I'll just bring this down, right? And so basically we would import the appropriate libraries. And so here we have the pandas library. The pandas library, if you look over here, the pandas documentation, and I'll share this in the description, right? It's basically helps out on how you can make use of the pandas data analysis library. Really interesting stuff, right? Let me see, let me make this. Yes, so you can look at this and you can see getting started is over here. There's a user guide and there are APIs. Getting started basically just gives you some basic concepts and additional tutorials on how to use this, right? So we'll import pandas and we'll import NumPy just to add to it. We'll talk about NumPy in future, but for now let's just talk about pandas and what we'll be doing to import data, then follow the different activities around it. Now once you write an import statement brings pandas, which is like it's a library. Some other person has written codes and functions which help perform certain tasks. So you import these modules, libraries, packages, and then they are now in your namespace. So that means if I put PD, which is basically the convention for creating an alias for this, and I put a dot to it, you notice that there are lots of methods that you can use to analyze the data you have. So same thing for MP, and you notice that all these are here. So as you proceed, you would notice that we would import different packages, and we'll look at that. Now, to source data, like I said in the first video, there are different repositories. We could source data either by going to a repository where there is data. For instance, there's the UCI machine learning repository. There is Kaggle, right? So you can basically jump on those areas, and you can see that Kaggle has a dataset area, right? So you see all that. So there are different data sets here, and you could jump on them, right? So let's start with an activity. Let's look at this repository. In the last video, we went to view all data sets, and then we clicked on this data. So, and then we downloaded it. So click on this, and look, it's always important when you're picking out a data set to read about it. So there's an abstract here that says predict the age of abalone from physical measurements, right? But it's important because when you're collecting data for a certain there's something you're trying to achieve. You're trying to extract information, you're trying to use logical techniques, you're trying to use statistical techniques, statistical analysis, logical analysis to extract patterns from data, right? So if you come over here, you see the data folder, then we take this. we take this, and then if I look over to my directory, it's always smart that you store it in a directory. So what I have done is that I have a directory already created for my data science channel, and inside of it, all this. So let me just show you guys. So if I come over to here, my documents, over here, you can see I called it GitHub for some reasons in the past. Right, so over here you're going to see data science channel, and inside you find that I have my file. So when I open Anaconda and go over to the Jupyter Notebook, and then normally the Jupyter Notebook would come over here and open from here. You can see this how it pops up on your favorite browser or your default browser. Then I come to documents over here, go to this GitHub directory, then I go and head over to the data science channel. So this makes it really cool to have all the data I'll be working with inside one repository, so I don't have to search for them when I need them. So right now I've got the data set, the Abalone data set. So what I'll do is I'll read it. Right. So first things first, when you want to read the data, you would create a variable. So now you see that the variables we've created or we've learned in introduction to Python now becomes really crucial. So we create a variable, use the assignment operator. Then now we are going to use the different functions and methods existing inside pandas, which is now PD, right? And we're going to use them to read or load the data set into a data frame. Again, what's a data frame? We're going to talk about all this one step at a time. Right, with this, I'll use the read CSV. Of course, it's not all data set formats that will work with the read CSV, but this data works. The data works for CSV. So I'll basically pick out the Abalone data set. You can see that it's already in my directory over here, so it's easy to pick out, and that's because I'm here. Now the first thing you do is you could just basically read it this way. Sometimes data looks different, so you could read it. Sometimes it's advisable to look at the data itself. You can click on it, and if it's editable or if it's readable, you can see what the data looks like first before you're trying to work on it. So you can see this data doesn't have column headers. It doesn't have column names. You can see it's just straight off that way. So that means if I read it this way, if I run this, then that means I already have Abalone here, and I can use Abalone.head, and head basically is a pandas function or a method that lets you return the first n rows, which is basically 5 by default, and it shows you this. Now you can see that I have basically read this data set. Right, so what I have done is I have read/loaded the data set into a data frame. Right, and so that's what I've done. Again, you would notice that it looks weird because it doesn't have headers or it doesn't have all this. So it's also important to go back. Sometimes when you go to the repository, sometimes you might find the column names. So so you can see here we have the column names. So I already have the column names, so I could just show you guys how you could basically read these column names, and that makes them look really okay. Also, so that we could round up on this, so you could also use another parameter called headers. Now when you use this parameter, you're basically saying, look, I don't want to use the first row as my header, because you see these are features in these columns. They are units of data in rows and in columns here. So I'll say I have none. So once this happens, then it's going to now just give me, so Pandas is just going to create its own, you can see that it created its own numbers as columns, right? So now the final part of what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the names that exist inside here, where is that? Here. I'm going to use the names that are here, right? I could download this too, so you can see that this will be downloaded. Basically go over to my directory, and so that's data science channel, and I'll store it inside my directory, and it's there. So so that means if I come over here, I'll see it. Let me see if it can be it's readable, right? And yep, so you can see that there's a lot of talk about what this is about, and so you try to see if you can find the different things. Yeah, look at them. So names, sex, length, diameters, all of them. So you could just basically copy all of them. So I already have this copied, so I'll show you how you can get that set up, right? So the we already know that abalone is the name of our variable containing the data frame, right? So you could just put columns, which is an attribute that now lets you you know, you create a list and you put all the names of that we saw, all the names for the columns. So we could just basically copy them in here, right? So with that, I have this. So which means you see the first one, sex, gender, you can see the representation, then lengths, diameters, and stuff like that, right? So you can see that. So if I simply run this, and then I come over here, so now I have named the column. So let me document this. Named the abalone columns. Then if you come over here and I type abalone dot head, first 5 rows, always remember, then now we already have this. So right, recap, we've sourced data from the repository, and I'm going to drop a links to all that, the repository, and of course the documentation I talked about. And then we used the read CSV method to read the data. We noticed that at first we noticed that it didn't have column names, so we just used header equals none, the parameter that creates you know, temporary column headers or column names. Then we now sort out the column names and we added them, and it's this way. So right, so take your time out and watch this video and learn a few things. In another video, we're going to look at maybe taking data from another repository and then, you know, sourcing it and then reading it up, and probably looking at different situations you might you know, come across when trying to read data in different ways. Right, so if you like the video, like it, share with your friends and enemies so that they can learn data science from scratch, one Python object at a time.